There are places in the world where silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is a message that says, this place existed long before you arrived, and it will exist long after you are gone, that this place does not need you. Wyoming, an area of 253,000 square kilometers, larger than the entire country of Vietnam. Population 600,000 people, fewer people than live in a single mid-sized district of a large city. 253,000 square kilometers, 600,000 people. But Wyoming is not empty because it has been overlooked, not because there is nothing to do here, and certainly not because it is poor. Wyoming has coal, oil, natural gas, and ranches that stretch beyond the horizon. It is empty for an entirely different reason. When 99% of the world is being conquered by human beings, what has kept Wyoming standing as a world apart? This is not a video about beautiful places to visit in Wyoming, not a list of the top destinations. This is a story about mechanism, about why a piece of land this vast operates according to rules that human beings have never truly controlled. We will move through 3 layers. The first, why Wyoming's terrain and climate create an environment where humans exist only as visitors. The second, 3 natural forces that are genuinely running this land and how they operate. The third, what the people of Wyoming have learned from all of this and why that creates a culture unlike anything else on Earth. This journey is about 40 minutes long. Pour yourself some coffee if you like and find a comfortable place to sit. Before we begin, I want to place the question that will travel with us throughout this entire journey. When 99% of the world is being conquered by human beings, what has kept Wyoming standing as a world apart? We will only answer it at the very end. 3 parts. Why? The terrain and climate of Wyoming. What? 3 natural forces running this place, and how the people here learned to live alongside all of it. Why is Wyoming still a world apart? Let us begin with a simple question. Why is Wyoming empty? Not empty in the way of the Sahara Desert or the Siberian tundra, empty in the way of a place that has good soil, has water, has resources, but where people simply do not stay. Wyoming has 600,000 residents spread across 253,000 square kilometers, which means that if you stand in the middle of this state and look in any direction, you can walk for hours without encountering another person. New York City holds more than 11,000 people per square kilometer. Wyoming holds 2. And this is not because Wyoming went unnoticed. The Transcontinental Railroad passed through here in 1869. Interstate highways cross the state today. Gold, coal, petroleum, Wyoming has had all of it. Wave after wave of migration has arrived here, and most of it has left. The answer lies in the climate, but not in the way you might expect. Wyoming is not the coldest state in America, not the hottest, not the driest. What makes Wyoming different is that it is unpredictable. Winters here can reach -40 degrees Celsius. Summers can climb to 35. But what is more unnerving than either extreme is the Chinook wind, a sudden warm front capable of raising temperatures by 20 degrees Celsius within a single hour. No warning, no schedule. It arrives when it chooses. An unpredictable environment is an environment that does not permit settlement in the conventional sense. Every long-term plan is vulnerable to a winter that arrives 3 weeks early, or a drought that stretches 3 years. That does not encourage the building of empires, it encourages adaptability. And there is another layer. Wyoming's geography is not uniform. This is not a single landscape state. This is 3 worlds within one set of borders. To the east, the Great Plains, grassland stretching to the horizon, swept by winds that encounter nothing to slow them, winters with no natural shelter. To the west, the Rocky Mountains, rugged terrain, passes above 3,000 meters, roads that close entirely through winter. And to the north, the Yellowstone Plateau, a living geothermal system, no urban infrastructure, only nature in the most literal sense. Each zone operates under its own conditions. None of them are particularly hospitable to building large cities. People have tried many times, and most have decided that other places are simply easier to live in. Wyoming does not reject human beings. It does not send anyone away. It simply does not adjust itself to accommodate them. And in a world where almost everything has been designed to accommodate human beings, that is something genuinely remarkable. But if it were only climate and terrain, why would Wyoming be any different from Alaska, or Montana, or Nevada, places that are equally empty and equally harsh?
The answer lies in something living beneath the ground of Wyoming and on the surface of it.
Three forces that created Wyoming's unwritten constitution, beneath our feet, in the most literal sense, is one of the most powerful geological engines on Earth.
Wyoming sits on top of a supervolcano,
a caldera of extraordinary scale that last erupted 640,000 years ago. The caldera measures 70 kilometers in one direction and 45 in another, and it is still alive. Old Faithful erupts on a cycle of roughly 90 minutes, not because it is performing.
That is pure mechanics. Groundwater heated to boiling point, pressure accumulating, releasing because there is simply nowhere else for it to go. There is no technician controlling a switch here. Grand Prismatic Spring is the largest hot spring in the United States. Its colors, deep blue at the center, then green, yellow, orange, and red in concentric rings moving outward, do not come from minerals. They come from bacteria, ancient microbial life surviving at 65 to 90 degrees Celsius, each species producing its own distinct pigment. Wyoming is not merely beautiful. Wyoming is beautiful because of things living here in ways that human beings cannot replicate. But the force that has changed Wyoming most dramatically in the last 30 years is not a volcano, not a geyser. It was 14 animals. In 1926, the last wolf in Yellowstone was killed. 70 years without wolves. No one paid particular attention, or if they did, they assumed everything was still functioning normally. The forests were green, the rivers flowed, elk grazed, but beneath the surface, a problem was forming. Without wolves, elk had no reason to move. They stood along riverbanks grazing for hours at a stretch. The vegetation along those banks was stripped bare. Without grass roots holding the soil, riverbanks began to erode. Without stable banks, rivers began to run straighter, wider, shallower. In 1995, the United States National Park Service decided to try an experiment, release 14 wolves from Canada into Yellowstone. Some scientists were hopeful, many local ranchers were opposed, but everyone watched. 14 wolves, Yellowstone. What happened next, ecologists call a trophic cascade, a chain reaction moving through the layers of an ecosystem. When wolves appeared, elk did not simply get hunted. Elk changed their behavior. They stopped standing still in the places where they were most vulnerable, along riverbanks, along the edges of sparse forest. They began to move more, continuously. When elk moved away, vegetation along the riverbanks began to grow back, not over years, over seasons. Willows, cottonwoods, and riparian plants sent up new growth within the first 2 years after the wolves were released. Root systems deepened, riverbanks solidified, and then something no one had predicted happened. The rivers changed course, not metaphorically. In a physical, measurable sense, the direction of tributary streams within Yellowstone shifted because the banks were harder, because root systems were holding the soil, because the riparian ecosystem had recovered. A decision about 14 animals changed the physical geography of a valley. Professor William Ripple of Oregon State University documented the full cascade in research published in 2012. Think of a trophic cascade like this. Imagine pulling the first domino in a long chain. No one looking at that first domino thinks this one will change the last, but it does. In nature, the connections between species are often deeper than any model we build to describe them. Wyoming is also home to approximately 50,000 wild Mustang horses, the largest population of any state in America, and the story of the Mustang is more complicated than people tend to assume. Their ancestors actually went extinct in North America around 10,000 years ago.
Spanish colonizers brought horses back in the 16th century. Some escaped, adapted, and created the feral herds we call Mustangs today. Is this a native species or an introduced one? Wyoming does not concern itself with that question. And then there is the grizzly bear. Wyoming, together with Montana and Idaho, is one of only 3 states in the lower 48. The 48 states that are not Alaska, where grizzly bears still exist in the wild. Not in a zoo, not in a fenced sanctuary, free, operating under their own rules within the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Wyoming is not wild because it is empty of people. Wyoming is wild because there are things here running this land according to their own rules, and they do not ask for anyone's permission. But geology, trophic cascade, apex wildlife, that is only 2 parts of 3. There is a third force that has been present here for thousands of years before any map existed, and they had already learned what the rest of the world is still searching for. The people of Wyoming learned to be guests. In the northeastern corner of Wyoming, rising from a completely flat plain with nothing around it for miles, there is a column of rock standing 265 meters tall. No surrounding mountains, nothing to explain why it is there. It simply stands, alone, calm, as though it has been standing there since before anyone thought to ask questions about it. 265 meters, 50 million years. Devil's Tower formed when magma intruded into surrounding rock, cooled and hardened, and the softer surrounding rock eroded away over millions of years, leaving a solid block of basalt standing as a remnant. The vertical columns running down its sides are the result of contraction as the magma cooled. The same way drying mud cracks into polygons, but vertical, and on a massive scale. But the Lakota people do not call this place Devil's Tower. They call it Matotipila, Bear Lodge. In their tradition, girls chased by a bear climbed onto a rock. The rock rose to protect them, and the bear's claws created the grooves running down the sides that we see today. This is not merely mythology. This is how a community has remembered and passed forward their relationship with this land across thousands of years without writing it down. Then Hollywood arrived. In 1977, Steven Spielberg's film Close Encounters of the Third Kind used Devil's Tower as the meeting point between humanity and something beyond the stars. Since then, this tower of rock has carried an association with things beyond ordinary understanding. And to professional climbers, this is one of the most technically demanding challenges in North America. A completely vertical face, no horizontal holds, a test that demands everything. The same rock. The Lakota see a sacred home. Hollywood sees a cosmic rendezvous point. Climbers see the challenge of a lifetime. None of them are wrong. They are each reading the same text in their own language. And the rock does not need any of them to agree with each other in order to keep standing there. About 400 kilometers to the southwest, there is a valley called Jackson Hole. And this is where Wyoming's deepest contradiction becomes most visible. Jackson Hole is where working cowboys and Silicon Valley billionaires coexist. Not because they are alike, but because Wyoming has something that neither of them can manufacture: genuine emptiness. Cowboys here ride horses to check on cattle across thousands of hectares of open land. Billionaires here buy land not to build towers, but so they can look out a window and see nothing. Wyoming does not adjust its schedule to match yours. There is no Wi-Fi on the open range, no ride sharing in a blizzard. When winter arrives, certain roads close for days, and the peculiar thing is, both the cowboy and the billionaire knew this when they chose to be here. They are not here in spite of the inconvenience. They are here because the inconvenience is part of the agreement. If this video made you want to sit still for just a moment longer, leave a comment, just the name of the city where you are watching from. That is all. And if you would dare to leave everything behind for 1 month in Wyoming, add the word guest after your city name. Across Wyoming, there are roughly 11,000 working ranches and farms still in operation, and the people running them, in the 21st century, with smartphones and satellite internet, still work according to the rhythms of nature, not the rhythms of financial markets or meeting schedules. They time their grazing rotations around the seasonal movements of wildlife because if they do not, the crops fail. They orient their buildings relative to the Chinook winds not out of philosophy, but because the wrong orientation means heating costs that can bankrupt a family. The culture of living with nature in Wyoming is not romanticization. It is the result of generations of failure, slowly filtering out everything that does not actually work. Come back to the Mustang one more time, because the story of the Mustang is the clearest metaphor for Wyoming itself. This species disappeared from North America, then returned, not because humans brought it back and managed it carefully, but because it found a place where natural conditions allowed it to survive without fences or assistance. Wyoming did not conserve the Mustang. Wyoming simply did not drive it away. And here is the strangest thing about Wyoming. The people who understand this most clearly are not scientists or politicians. They are the ones who have lived here long enough to be taught by Wyoming itself. Every person who has spent enough winters here, cowboy, Lakota, billionaire or rancher, has arrived at the same understanding that in Wyoming you are a guest, and the land is the host. You can stay as long as you respect that arrangement. The moment you forget it, Wyoming will remind you. Wyoming is not wild because it lacks people. It is wild because living geology, trophic cascade, and apex predators are simultaneously operating a system that human beings have never truly controlled. 14 wolves changed the course of a river. A supervolcano sleeps beneath the ground. 50,000 horses cannot be tamed. This is the unwritten constitution, uncodified but inviolable. And the people who live here, whether Lakota, cowboy, or billionaire, have all been taught the same lesson. In Wyoming, you are a guest. The emptiness is the host. When 99% of the world is being conquered by human beings, what has kept Wyoming standing as a world apart? Not environmental law, not remoteness, not poverty. Wyoming already had its own constitution, written by geology, by biology, by climate, millions of years before any human document existed. Human beings are simply the most recent chapter in a very long story. If this video made you want to sit still for a moment longer, leave a comment below. Just the name of the city where you are watching from. That is all. The journeys ahead will take us to other places on Earth that are also holding on to their own world apart. And those stories are no less extraordinary. Turn on notifications if you want to be called when we set out.